Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, I'm going to plunge into the world of online platforms where critiques on social media, like places like fetish.com, FetLife, Twitter, Facebook, any social media platforms really where our BDSM community or lifestyle community kind of go and talk about each other or try to connect, even in places like Discord, where really the critiques on these sites echo through our collective understanding of masculinity. So before we delve into this deeper today, I want to share kind of a glimpse of a behind the scenes as for what I do for a living. And then I want you to imagine in this digital arena here as a space where men critique each other's behavior. This is quite a common thing and a common occurrence that I see. And it's not just the spectacle of what they're talking about. It's really a raw exchange of voices, and it's often drowning out in a sea of virtual judgments. And as I kind of start to unravel this a little bit, I want to examine the complex world of online dynamics and where the consequences here of these unchecked criticisms reach beyond the digital realm. So today's journey isn't really about unraveling the dynamics of the critique and masculinity. It's more about seeking solutions. And as we go through these currents here, we're going to challenge the status quo. We're going to question these societal norms, and we're going to, or at least I'm going to try to attempt here to strive for a more nuanced understanding of masculinity. So I realize this. So let's just go ahead and buckle up for a ride that's going to go beyond the surface today and get into the depth of human experiences and the evolving landscape of our perceptions about men. Because this is really where I'm going with this today. I realize it's an ever evolving problem, but everything starts with somewhere else. If we're criticizing young boys in the beginning and telling them when they're born, if they're just born a man, that they're automatically a rapist, or that all men are rapists, or anything else like this, that they're terrible, they don't understand chivalry, they don't know how to protect someone, they're only predators. If we are constantly deriding somebody on such a scale, all that is going to happen is you are going to then make them believe this. We are going to destroy them and believe that only effeminate behavior is the right way. So we are telling them that toxic masculinity is the only way, is all that is going on with them, that they're all these traits of what we understand to be manly and what one can aspire to are wrong to aspire to in the first place. And thus is the world that we are now in. And I see this in all of these critiques online, men, you got to do better, instead of calling out the one person that's seeking out this behavior and then even understand what's really driving the behavior. Now, society, if everybody's arguing lately that, society and gender is just a societal construct and all these things, well, that being aside, the reality is society drives behavior. So if I grow up in a loving environment, I understand what a loving relationship and expression of feelings look like. I'm allowed to understand comfort and compassion and empathy. But if I don't have that, if I'm bombarded with something else, that's what I grow up with my expectations to be. If I'm in a world where everybody is angry, then I must be an angry person or I don't fit in. If everyone's sad, I should be sad. These are all the things that society ends up teaching us. Now, in the digital realm, especially on platforms of social media, a peculiar sight tends to unfold, and this becomes men critiquing each other's behavior. And it's not merely the critique that raises the eyebrows, but the absence of any constructive guidance here. And this is what I tend to see. I witness this cacophony of voices seemingly eager to point figures at all of these different people or blanket expressions, often in an attempt to virtue signal. But it lacks the roadmap of any serious improvement. Just, you need to do better. Well, what does doing better do? I mean, I could reduce it further down to saying what is normal. In some cultures and some religions and some people practice around the world, it's culturally acceptable to beat a woman in public. But we're not sitting here and screaming about it. So what we're really talking about is specific behavior, the patterns that are being exhibited by specific individuals. But then we need, if we are going to understand that behavior, look at the other side. What's driving it? If I'm being bombarded by 1,000 images and posts a day of things that people want done to them, we begin to believe, right or wrong, we begin to believe this is what people are after. So instead of approaching our interactions with respect and our due diligence, we approach them under this falsehood. We're not recognizing the difference between fantasy or reality. We have seen this when certain social media platforms have opened, the borders have become crossed. We now see Tinder's influx, which has helped reduce the interactions between males and females to more of a merely sexual transaction. And that's fine if you're only in it for the short term. But there's no long-term development here of any relationship hierarchy or emotional transference between the two people. It's a simple transaction. With the rise of places like OnlyFans over the last few years, especially during the COVID pandemic and all the lockdowns and people needed to generate money, we have created a space where sex work, that's fine if that's what you want to call it, is done online, but then they're promoting a fantasy. And in promoting that fantasy, they say things to attract customers, but the problem is until you look for the nuanced areas that say that this is what they're doing, we believe that this is guiding behavior. Now, there is a lot of science and research to back this up, and I'm not going to bore you with all of that. That information is out there. Whether you choose to look it up, that's for your own validation. I'm not here to guide you through that today because I'm not going to go through the hundreds and hundreds of articles that I've seen. I am talking about more so of how we start picking on men for every little thing they do, for every time they make a comment. Sometimes, yes, so the comment's wrong, absolutely, and I call that behavior out when I see it. They shouldn't be doing it. It's unhealthy. But in the same regards, if they're also giving a compliment, then I've also seen people getting extremely angry and then white knights coming in to defend the behavior. And that, by the way, doesn't help the situation anymore. It also backfires. So when we're looking at these interactions, while we have to respect the rights of people to express themselves, the online world uniquely amplifies its critiques. Judgments unfold swiftly here, and they resonate beyond the virtual realm. And this, as we are all become more interconnected globally but separated physically, each critique carries an implication beyond these individual exchanges. This rapid dissemination of these ideas and opinions on these platforms adds a distinctive dimension to the dialogue, and it's not just a personal expression. It contributes to the molding of our collective understanding of masculinity. As we look at these things in a deeper level, it's going to reveal the serious, broader implications of the behavior on self-perception and even the societal narrative. So what happens when these consequences of unchecked critiques continue? The lack here of constructive critique doesn't just float in the digital ether. It manifests real consequences, and men caught in the loop of criticism consistently and without guidance find themselves adrift in the sea of uncertainty. And it becomes this cycle that potentially leaves them feeling unheard, unseen, perpetuates a narrative that lacks depth and any understanding. And then I can already hear, well, you're talking about the incel crowd. I'm not. I'm talking about any man that whether or not they've ever dated someone, just because you don't like their behavior, all of a sudden it's got to change. It has to change in your view. And it doesn't seem to work that way. We can tell them, hey, this isn't acceptable, and cut them off, and that's fine. Well within your rights. Again, I would support that. I don't support blind blanketed attacks against an entire gender just to label them. If we do this to women, everybody's up in arms, but we do it to men, it's like an Olympic sport. And I've written and talked about this before. It does become apparent, though, that these unchecked critiques breeds not only confusion, but a serious and profound sense of disconnection. And in the absence of any constructive guidance, which none of these posts from either men or women attacking men, these individuals navigate these judgments with, they're creating isolation for other people. They're creating a fear of anxiety, social expression. We're now separating ourselves even in the digital landscape, which should connect us more. And this isn't just about pointing fingers here. It's about recognizing the human impact of our online interactions. And that goes for men who are saying things. If you're acting like an ass, well, then don't be expected to be treated with any sort of respect or regard. But if you're just attacking all men because one person said one thing to you, especially on a sexually explicit website where these interactions are sexual in nature, highly controversial, exposing a lot of maybe nudity or scene depictions or whatever the case they may be, or even pornographic images or even amateur porn, there is going to be some sort of expectation of some of the responses you are going to receive in the digital realm. If you are denying that those responses are going to come, then you are being willfully ignorant, because there's really no other ways to say it. I tend to ignore a lot of the criticism that comes my way because it's just sometimes people trolling. We don't have to engage with those people. We choose to engage with those people. Now, psychologically here, the constant barrage of criticism that men tend to receive without constructive solutions at all leads to heightened levels of anxiety, a pervasive sense of inadequacy, and this tends to keep this moving forward. So we start calling people names, we start telling them how shitty they are. Guess what happens? They start believing it without anything founded. They don't recognize any patterns to change. You don't want to really tell them how to change. You're just saying, oh, these people are innocent little fawns over here. You're the big demon. You're the big demon or devil. And then that's the end of the story. But you're not telling them what to improve or how to really engage. Or you give these, oh, well, just critique nicely on their photographs. Well, if a photograph or a video is asking you for explicit reactions to what they're doing, or is involved in self-degradation, and then the person who posted is asking for feedback, then they don't like the feedback. Well, then why are you asking for this in the first place? So the one behavior is driving the other, but that's okay because we're not blaming anyone else. We're only blaming men. Well, it doesn't work because you're not addressing the full situation. There are a lot of people here who are involved. And regardless of the fact of what people are going to think of this episode today, the reality is what I'm saying is true. All behavior shapes all behavior. If I'm alone and I have nothing to mimic, then my behavior is shaped by me. But if I'm in a room of 10 people and I'm developing a sense of myself and behaviors on how I should act within this small group setting or society, we could call it, my behavior is going to be dictated by them. If all of those people start drinking, I'm probably going to start drinking. If all of them start smoking, I'm going to probably start smoking because I'm going to want to fit in. And this becomes the problem that we don't seem to understand. These are even basic level psychological issues that people seem to skip over. But this psychological toll that extends beyond this virtual realm that affects these individuals in their daily lives. And this impact is crucial to understanding. And as I go into this deeper in the next parts of the show here, we have to understand there are repercussions. And we even are getting to the point now where we're going into emotional emasculation and we're thinking that becomes okay. And this has a very delicate interplay between behavior and people's mental well-being. So what are some of these consequences, you might be wondering, of emasculation? Well, there's a lot of profound ramifications to it. And where criticism often lacks this constructive guidance, the impact of emasculation extends far beyond the individual. And it ends up permeating the very depths of relationships, connections, and the person themselves. But maybe you don't even really understand what emasculation is. So emasculation at its core entails the systematic belittlement, demeaning, and undermining of a man's intrinsic masculinity. We'll tell them they're toxic, they shouldn't be chivalrous, right? They shouldn't stand up, they shouldn't protect anyone. You're terrible for doing that. And this deleterious concoction materializes through the disrespect of the abilities, questioning of their competency, the derision of their emotions, the reduction of worth to stereotypical gender roles. You know, if a man is getting upset, you start calling him names, you belittle him. Then you complain that men aren't showing their feelings, and then you're wondering why. It transcends being a mere retaliatory gesture for historical subjugation. We're not 500 years ago when people were doing things that were terrible. We've evolved as a society in a lot of ways for a more progressive stance. Look at where we are at in the world. If you don't think the world is more progressive, then I think you need to leave your home. Unfortunately, though, this emerges as a formidable force with repercussions that resonate beyond the immediate target and significantly influence relationships, and they hinder personal growth, and it impedes the pursuit of gender equality at its core. Because if you keep telling someone they're a dirtbag and they're terrible just for being a man, well, how do you think that they're ever going to learn to treat somebody? Well, mothers aren't doing it because they're raising their sons nowadays to, telling them how terrible they are before they've had a chance to figure out who they are in the world. So emasculation here goes beyond mere words. It becomes the storm that ravages these mental landscapes of people, and it leaves scars of anxiety, depression, deep-seated senses of inadequacy. And it's not just an insult that people are throwing around. It becomes this corrosive force that infiltrates the core of one's being. And it goes beyond the emotional turmoil that emasculation extends into this reach of this physical realm where individuals grapple to assert their masculinity. And they may resort to misguided expressions like excessive drinking, smoking, or prioritizing societal expectations over their genuine self-care. And this isn't about a display of toughness. It becomes a manifestation of the inner struggle induced by emasculation. And the fallout isn't confined to individual struggles here. It sends shockwaves through the entire fabric of how a relationship works. Partners find themselves caught in the crossfire of the storm, facing the challenge of transformed dynamics, and they're brought about it by emasculation. And there's a really good case of it in the UK where a woman was so abusive, so emotionally emasculating, she left her partner for dead. The man didn't have a sense of who he was, didn't know he couldn't, and no matter what he did, he was consistently wrong. Subsequently, if a man did this to a woman, he would have been in prison for the rest of her life. I think this woman, she only got maybe a couple of years. Now, subsequently, she's engaged. Good luck to that guy. So how do we understand what the personalizing the impact of this is? So if we're moving beyond the theoretical discourse here, in my experiences and my practice, this sheds light on the tangible impact of the emotional emasculation, especially in my work with men. It's not an abstract concept here. It's a journey alongside these men grappling with the aftermath of the storm. The struggle to form healthy relationships becomes palpable for them because the individuals attempt to communicate authentically with somebody while contending with the shadow of inadequacy imposed by the external forces telling them they're consistently garbage. And this isn't just some detached observation I'm having. It's an invitation for you all to understand the real and often challenging experiences of those men navigating the complex waters of relationships amidst the ebb and flow of their own feelings and how they should be acting, whether they should try to pay for the bill or pick the girl up at her house or bring her flowers or open the door, when they're constantly being told that they don't need to do any of those things. If you're constantly jumping from the fire to the frying pan, you eventually lose sight of who you are. So what becomes the impact on relationships? Well, the repercussions of this emotional emasculation extend beyond the individual, and they leave this mark on their relationships. Intimacy, once that was this wonderful shared pursuit, becomes an elusive goal in the aftermath of emotional turbulence. Communication, which I talk about all the time, the lifeblood of all relationships, falters under the weight of the storm, and it strains the delicate balance that binds two people together. This becomes this acknowledgement of the shared challenge that transforms the dynamics between individuals. Emotional emasculation, rather than existing in isolation, creates this ripple effect that we're seeing now, shaping the intricate moments of human connections. And that's where a lot of this tends to keep stemming, that we just think we can call people names, they're going to go off and learn, and then you know what, they're never going to do this again. No, we're creating people who are worse or affecting their mental health. And we're doing a lot more damage because we're not providing anything. Now, of course, we can't reach out and work with every person that's problematic, but we can at least attempt to try, especially inside of a community we all say we want to be a part of. It's not an exclusionary, it's not a private club. And a lot of these people who are shouting these and writing these terrible posts, or emasculating men or calling them names, I hate to tell you, you're in the wrong. You're not doing it any better. And as a matter of fact, when other men who may have had any interest see how you're reacting, they're not going to want to get involved. So what you are left with is effeminate men who then later on, feminized men, end up complaining about. Why? Because they're not providing this security and masculinity that they were looking for in the first place. So it becomes their own revolving door of you're your own worst enemy here. So how do we navigate all this criticism and this societal shifts? Well, this becomes this discernible pattern that emerges beyond the superficial analysis here. Critique often manifests as virtue signaling, lacking the necessary depth for any genuine understanding. Men find themselves scrutinized, peers acting as judges, yet a glaring issue persists, the absence again of anything constructive to do anything better. And this, like I just said, perpetuates the cycle of blame that intensifies in the very challenges it seeks to address. So how do maybe cultural dynamics play into this? Well, as the complexities of societal shifts provides a nuanced perspective on men's responses to criticisms, it's not merely about the individual experiences themselves, it becomes a reflection of the broader societal changes, and the evolving perceptions of men and women entwined with shifting norms contribute to the cultural mosaic demanding our thoughtful consideration. And this parallel narrative here reveals the interconnectedness of our perceptions and our interactions, and it encourages us to look beneath the surface of people. So how do we even unpack all of these societal implications? Well, if we're looking at dynamics being shaped by shifting societal norms, it becomes evident that the evolving role of men is woven into everything of our collective experience. These changes hold implications for individuals' well-being inside of our relationships and their mental health. And the challenge here lies in understanding and navigating these shifts, drawing inspiration from insights that guide us through the cultural terrain without oversimplifying all of the complexities that lie about. And if we're in a landscape that's dominated by a critique, a notable absence for any practical solutions, then we have to, if we want to move out of the cycle of blame, there has to be a collective need for proactive steps towards improvement. And isolation, sticking them in a corner, not talking to anybody, or no engagement, calling them names and belittling them, sure isn't going to help the problem. So this need necessitates a shift from finger pointing to collaborative efforts, creating dialogue, helping people understand. That's what becomes paramount. Just saying do better doesn't do anything. That's a catchphrase. Guess what? It's wearing thin. It's supposed to be about men supporting each other and navigating these complexities of evolving societal norms and relationships, and maybe having someone to talk to, but not sticking them in a corner and ridiculing them because they don't know how to talk to a woman, or they're going through a tough breakup and we're only concerned with the other party. If we end up understanding this through shared experiences and mutual support, then we are creating a path towards a positive change, and that's when we see that begin to emerge. And when we're looking at all of these things, these challenges and triumphs within the realm of masculinity and societal dynamics, the emphasis remains on the urgency of seeking solutions amid the critique, amid the put-downs, amid just collectively putting everybody, one gender together, because it's not women that are facing it, it's men. And that becomes the problem. So how do we reevaluate masculinity and advocate positive traits? Well, first we need to start with what there seems to be the problem, and that's analyzing toxic masculinity. Let's take a moment and look at this intricate concept of toxic masculinity that's so taken hold in everybody's lexicon, they're just willing to toss it out at a moment's notice. And in my discourse, I've talked about this before, the complexities of this term. It operates as a label that unfortunately oversimplifies a really compounded issue, and it casts a broad and often unwarranted shadow on men as a collective. Men in reality are not a monolithic entity here. They represent a diverse spectrum of experiences and virtues, cultures, religions, shortcomings, experiences, jobs. And to comprehend masculinity in its entirety, we must resist the lure of reductionist theories and strive for a better understanding that respects the intricacies within it. And we ask this of everybody else to do this for women. We ask this to do this for different communities. We just don't want to do it for men. It seems to be almost like a collective hatred of men because it's easy to be collectively hatred. And then we throw out words like the patriarchy and racism and we start just dogpiling everything. By that moment, the conversations are over. And then we wonder why the engagement is so limited with people that we ultimately don't even want to be associated with. So how do we advocate here for positive masculinity? Well, there was an interesting paper by Dr. Nina Powers, and her perspective serves as a really valuable compass here in navigating our resistance to the concept of toxic masculinity. The promotion of positive masculinity doesn't entail discarding the entire construct, but rather involves discerning the healthy aspects within it. Strength, leadership, compassion emerge as these pillars to be preserved, while the harmful elements like aggression and emotional repression become challenged. This approach calls for a reconsideration of societal norms that confine men to limiting stereotypes. It urges us to celebrate the individuals who embody the virtues such as honor, respect, courage, compassion, empathy. And by embracing those positive attributes, we pave the way for more inclusive and authentic understanding of masculinity, or something to be aspiring to, not running from. So, how do we look at some more of these nuances? Positive masculinity here defines a one-size-fits-all concept. It really does beckon us to recognize the subtle nuances within this complex construct. Strength, rather than being a singular force, manifests in vulnerability. It takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable as a man. And I described this last week. I had been so emotionally overloaded with everything that I'm seeing regarding what's going on in the Middle East, and part of what I say in the beginning of my show, I'm also a consultant. I'm consulting on those things. Then I watched this wonderful video a couple of weekends ago, and I kind of just broke down because of all of the stress and everything that I had been facing. I cried. I was really just being vulnerable. And that took a lot of strength and vulnerability to do that in front of my partner. And that's not weakness. I shouldn't be belittled for that. And I'm not saying I was. But others may make fun of that, and that's the type of things I've seen. Going further, leadership, far from a rigid archetype here, thrives in empathy. Courage, instead of being a stoic display, flourishes in authenticity. Men are far from being confined to a predetermined brushstroke, right? They emerge as individuals crafting a diverse area and landscape for themselves and paths of expression, and they blend their strength with compassion. It lies within these nuanced areas that we discover the authentic essence of positive masculinity, free from the constraints of oversimplified stereotypes of what we think men are, because we're not allowing them to be anything else. So, a little bit into my own personal insight in my own journey. I've been fortunate to be surrounded by men who, pardon me, who defy the negative generalizations often thrust upon them. From my father to my brother to those who have served within the military or law enforcement and firefighters, regardless of whatever they are doing, these individuals transcend the faceless stereotypes that pervade our societal narrative. They're not merely the embodiment of masculine archetypes. They're unique individuals with stories that are intricately challenge the prevailing narrative. These men who navigate life with love, they raise families, they exhibit compassion, they risk their lives, they dedicate themselves to protecting the innocent. Reflecting on these personal experiences becomes evident that these men are not bound by simplistic categorizations. They're not. They embody the positive masculinity in diverse ways. As fathers imparting values to their children, as brothers supporting each other through life's trials, as individuals making profound sacrifices for the greater good. The diversity within masculinity becomes apparent when we witness these men as living embodiments of positive qualities, defying the simplistic narratives that often overshadow their rich individuality. And there's a lot of human faces to masculinity, and beyond the confines of stereotypes, the men in my life emerge as the living embodiments of positive masculinity. They defy all of these things. They embody the dynamic and evolving nature of the human experience. These are fathers who, beyond societal expectations, actively participate in shaping the moral compass of their kids. They are individuals that make these sacrifices that resonate beyond the personal spheres, that contribute to society in better ways, create better products, think of better things for humanity. Recognizing that the human faces of masculinity unravels a spectrum of experiences that challenges and transcends our societal norms. We have to look at them and say, you know what, that could be my father, my brother, my husband, my boyfriend. And they're okay. They're doing the world better and they're not asking anything for it. These men are far from conforming to rigid archetypes and showcase all the vastness and the diversity, where strength coexists with their vulnerability and courage manifests in authenticity. There's one thing that there's this resounding call that I like to engage in, that conversations that genuinely acknowledge and celebrate the positive aspects of masculinity, as tough as that might be. We need to start, if we're really talking about cultivating safe spaces, we need to cultivate a space where men are recognized for their diverse experiences and then meaningful contributions. They're not just some footnote or some anecdote that gets said in the hushed tones in the corners of our dungeons or on a message post on FetLife. The path to understanding masculinity is intricate and nuanced, and every conversation, irrespective of its scale, propels us forward in this ongoing exploration. And if we're all in this collective journey of understanding and appreciation, dismantling the simplistic narratives, embracing the complex nature of positive masculinity is a lot easier to do than it is just to, or it's a lot harder to do and requires a lot more work than it is just to beat up on someone. The road ahead is illuminated by authentic stories and experiences of men, inviting us to contribute to a more nuanced and compassionate dialogue on masculinity instead of just rolling our sleeves up and just trying to destroy it. Because what are you going to have left? Because more often than not, when I talk to people, they want people who exhibits the traits of positive masculinity. They don't want to find somebody who's destroyed it. So as I kind of wrap this all up today, I know that there's really complex dimensions here, masculinity. And I want to challenge all of these narratives, and I get sick of reading these constant posts. And a lot of the times they're not just because something's happened. They just feel, a lot of the times they're being virtue signaled, and especially by other men, they're doing it. They're putting it up so they can draw attention to themselves, because you're not really changing anything. You're just repeating the same thing over and over. And a lot of the times these things aren't happening, and if they are, then why aren't you confronting it? So here, I'm hoping that through the personal reflections and understanding these critiques and trying to get people to understand these conversations, that we recognize and appreciate the diverse experiences of men. And dismantling some of these stereotypes that often shroud masculinity, we end up revealing the human faces of strength and compassion and authenticity that are behind it. In this reel, I want to leave you with this quote. In this diverse spectrum here of masculinity, each aspect contributes to a unique narrative. Strength isn't a rigid construct, but a spectrum that embraces vulnerability. Leadership thrives in empathy, and courage finds a voice in authenticity. As men navigate this, they may find solace in the richness of their diverse expressions that transcend the societal expectations of what they should be, just because somebody else is trying to dictate that to them. So I want to leave you all with a question. How does one perception of masculinity influence their mental and emotional well-being? It's a pretty deep question to start thinking about and reflecting on. If you do listen to my show on Spotify, please rate it 5 stars so others can find it. This allows me to keep doing this for now for free. I have a book out called Tangled Desires, the intersection between BDSM and psychology. It's available wherever you can get your online books or your ebooks. I am currently working on a second revision to be for hard books. I know some people are requesting that. It just takes some time. I'm in the middle of that now. But let me know in the comment sections what you think about the show today, what you think about masculinity, and hopefully we can keep this conversation going and stop ridiculing people just because they're men. Until next time, everybody, be safe, stay keen.